Hello, everyone. Tonight we're stepping into a story about quiet heartbreak and unexpected courage. One of those nights where something small turns out to change everything. Outside my window, the rain was whispering down just soft enough to feel like a memory, the kind that makes you want to wrap yourself in a blanket and not answer the phone. Unless it's from someone who used to be your whole world. You might not survive this story without feeling something crack open in you. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere special tonight, drop your city and local time in the comments. I love knowing who's out there with me. Now, turn off the lights, maybe get a fan going for some soft noise, and let's dive into tonight's journey together. He hadn't called in nearly a year. That alone should have told me everything I needed to know. But when the phone rang that Thursday afternoon and Jackson's name lit up across the screen, I felt it again. That little rush. The one that makes your chest lift just before you say hello, even when logic tells you not to hope. "Hey, Mom," he said, all casual, like we'd just spoken last week. "We're doing a little something for Lily's birthday. Thought it'd be nice if you came." He said it like we hadn't spent the last few years tap dancing around each other's silence. Like we hadn't missed holidays and check-in calls and Sunday morning coffees. Like time hadn't settled between us like a thick coat of dust. And yet, I smiled. Because he mentioned the sugar cookies I used to bake. The ones with cracked cinnamon glaze and edges that flaked just enough to fall apart in your mouth. Said Lily had been asking about them. That small detail, those cookies, felt like a thread tugged loose from the old days. I told him I'd come. It was raining lightly outside. That kind of gentle Carolina drizzle that softens the world instead of drenching it. I remember standing by the window after we hung up, just holding the phone, letting the silence bloom around me. Maybe this was it, I told myself. Maybe the beginning of something smoother. Maybe motherhood wasn't always a losing game. That night, I packed slow. Older folks don't rush packing. We don't throw things in a suitcase and zip up the future. We fold, we pause. We touch each piece and wonder if it'll still smell like home when we open it again. I pulled out the navy dress I always saved for special occasions. Pressed it myself, slow and even. Just the way my husband Mark used to say made me look like I ran a department store. I packed a soft scarf for Lily, a lilac one I'd knitted last winter when the lights flickered too much and I needed something to do with my hands. And then, I did something I hadn't planned. I slipped a photo into my purse, just a small, worn picture of me and Jackson. He must have been 10, braces showing, one hand still clutching mine like it was a lifeline. I kept it tucked inside the lining, not to give, just to remember. There's a strange tenderness in preparing your home to be empty for a few days. I watered the fern by the window, checked the fridge, closed the door with a little extra softness. I didn't sleep much that night, not from worry, from hope. Friday morning came. I stood by the door with my coat already on, suitcase upright, glancing at the clock again. 8:13 a.m. He'd said around 8. Funny how when you're waiting on someone you love, 5 minutes feels like 50. Like each tick of the second hand is asking you if you're sure about all this. He pulled up just before 8:30. A silver SUV, windows cracked. Some kind of upbeat playlist spilling out into the quiet. He smiled when he saw me, like everything was normal. Like this was just another day in a perfectly stitched-together life. And I smiled back, because mothers do that, even when we know better. He leaned over, popped the trunk, didn't get out, just sat there, fingers tapping the wheel like his brain had already moved on. I opened the trunk myself, wrestled the suitcase up into the corner, and closed it with a quiet thud, then walked over to the passenger window. "Hey," I said, lightly, "you want me to sit up front?" "Oh, no need, Mom. You're not coming with me. I've got an errand to run. But I already picked up your ticket. Just head inside the station. It's all set up. Train should be here soon. I'll meet you at the house." He said it like a plan that had already been decided for me. The station was quiet. Early morning hush. A couple pigeons fluttering near the bike rack. I nodded, swallowed the lump I didn't want to admit was forming. "Okay," I said. He smiled again. Barely this time. More like a flicker of politeness. Then he drove off. No hug, no glance in the rear view, just red tail lights fading into the mist. I stood there for a second. Just me, a Navy suitcase, and a street that didn't blink. Inside the Asheville station, it was like time had slowed. Vinyl seats bolted to the floor, a humming vending machine by the wall. One of those clocks that ticks loud enough to remind you that you're alone. I walked to the counter, gave the lady my name. She typed, paused, tried again. "I'm not seeing anything under that name," she said through the glass. I blinked. "My son said he already booked it. Told me to just check in." She frowned. Could he have used a different name? I shook my head. "No, just mine." She tried once more, then gently said, "I'm sorry. There's nothing here." I reached into my purse. No ticket, no confirmation email. My phone buzzed a low warning, 3% battery, no charger in my bag. I sat down near the window, suitcase beside me, and waited. 5 minutes, then 10, then 30. No call, no message, no Jackson. That's the moment you realize you're not a passenger anymore. You're the one left behind. The thing about waiting, real waiting, is that it doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't come with violins or a single tear falling down your cheek. No, it's quieter than that. It's the feeling of your coat getting warmer against your back because you've been sitting still too long. It's the way the second hand on the wall clock starts to sound like it's echoing. I stayed there in the Asheville train station for another hour, watching the door, watching the street, watching absolutely nothing happen. The woman behind the counter stopped making eye contact after the first 30 minutes. Not out of unkindness, just because there's only so much polite confusion a stranger can offer before it turns into something else. Pity. I stood up, walked outside, hoping maybe Jackson would swing back around, that maybe it was a mix-up, that maybe this was all a misunderstanding, and his silver SUV would pull up beside the curb, music still playing, and he'd laugh. "Can you believe I forgot the ticket? You know me." But the curb was empty, completely. A stray dog limped across the lot, like he had somewhere better to be. A man in a camouflage cap bought a newspaper and didn't even glance my way. I walked around the side of the station, checked behind it too, because when you've been left, part of you still clings to hope that maybe you just missed the turn, that maybe you're not abandoned, you're just off track. But I already knew. Back inside, the vinyl seats felt colder, harder, like they'd turned from furniture to judgment. I tried Jackson's number again. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I didn't trust the sound of my own voice. It felt too tight, like if I started to speak, I might never stop crying. My phone blinked one last time, 1%, then died, just like that. No backup, no charger, just me in a train station that had stopped caring if I left or stayed. Now, if you've ever been in a situation like that, you know what happens next. Your body stays in the room, but your spirit kind of floats above it, watching yourself, wondering how in the world this became your life, wondering how your own child, your own blood, could orchestrate something like this and still sleep at night. It's a strange kind of grief. Not death, not betrayal, something quieter, something like being edited out of a photo you thought you'd always be in. And that's when Ruthie showed up. She walked in like she'd done it 100 times before, wore a denim jacket with a frayed collar, and had the kind of face that looked like it had already forgiven you for whatever you hadn't said yet. She didn't sit right away. She looked at me, tilted her head, and held out a warm paper cup. "You look like you could use something hot," she said. I didn't argue. We crossed the street slowly. My suitcase wheels caught every crack in the sidewalk, like they were determined to make the walk harder. Ruthie matched my pace, didn't rush me, didn't ask questions, just walked beside me like we'd always done this. Her bookstore was barely larger than my living room, smelled like paper and wood polish, and maybe a hint of cinnamon someone had spilled a long time ago. She pointed to an old armchair near the window. "Sit, I'll get us tea." I obeyed. The chair was deep and low, the kind that makes you lean back whether you want to or not. And in that moment, I needed something to hold me. She brought me tea in a chipped mug with a sunflower on it. It was bitter. No sugar, no milk, just honest leaves and hot water. Kind of like life when you're done pretending. We didn't speak for a while. She worked behind the counter, rearranging a pile of paperbacks with cracked spines. I stared out the window at a group of teenagers laughing as they passed. They reminded me of Lily, full of too much joy for their bones to hold. Eventually, Ruthie spoke. "Saw you across the street. Recognized the look. I've worn it." I didn't answer. She didn't seem to mind. She told me she'd owned the shop for almost 30 years, that people don't read like they used to, but that the weight of books anchors her, keeps her from drifting. I nodded. "You can measure a whole life by the books you keep," I murmured. That was the first real thing I'd said since Jackson drove away. She smiled. "Exactly." She didn't ask why I was there. Didn't press. Just let the silence settle around us like a blanket. That kind of grace is rare. Eventually, she pulled a book off the shelf and handed it to me. "You don't have to read it. Just hold it. Sometimes the weight of a story helps more than the story itself." I held it. Didn't open it. Just let it rest in my lap like something warm and loyal. We stayed like that through the afternoon. The sky outside turned from soft gray to steel blue. Wind picked up. Ruthie brought out a thin blanket and draped it across my legs like it was nothing, like I was family. That night, I slept in her shop. She set up a cot near the poetry section. Didn't say much. Just handed me a bottle of water and told me where the bathroom was. There's something healing about sleeping in a room full of stories, like the characters themselves keep watch. I didn't dream that night. I just breathed. In the morning, Ruthie was already up, reading some old book with the binding cracked down the middle, her reading glasses low on her nose. She made oatmeal on a tiny burner behind the counter. No milk, no sugar, just oats and raisins. I ate every bite. It tasted like steadiness. After breakfast, she handed me a dish towel. "Here," she said. "Wipe that bowl clean. That's how we say thank you around here." I did. Around noon, I told her I needed to get home. She didn't ask where that was. Just handed me a brown paper bag with 2 granola bars, a bottle of water, and a folded umbrella. "Says the sky ain't done with you yet," she said. She was right. By the time I was halfway to Boone, the rain came back. This time louder, sharper. It tapped the bus windows like it was demanding something. When I got back to my apartment, the first thing I noticed was how heavy the air felt. I dropped my wet coat onto the back of a chair and went straight to my bedroom closet. That's where the old filing cabinet was. Rusty, sticky, but still holding everything that mattered. Inside it, a folder marked in my late husband Mark's handwriting. The trust, the one Jackson thought I'd forgotten about. The filing cabinet drawer stuck like always. It had this stubborn left corner that you had to lift just so, or it would screech like a warning. Mark used to say it was the cabinet's way of reminding you not to go looking for things unless you were ready to deal with them. I reached inside and pulled out the folder with the green tab, his handwriting on the label, sharp and square. Trust, private, not for public eyes, not even Jackson's, though he probably thought he already had it all figured out. I sat at the kitchen table, folder unopened, fingers tracing the edge like I was waiting for it to whisper a secret. Mark was never a flashy man. Grew up in a house with 3 brothers and 1 bathroom. He wore the same wristwatch for 40 years, had his Sunday shoes resoled 3 times before finally giving them up. But when it came to protecting his family, he planned, quietly, thoroughly, like a man who had learned early that love sometimes meant thinking 3 steps ahead. He had set up this trust after his first surgery, when the doctors found that spot on his lung. We never talked much about it, not in dramatic ways. He just told me, "In case anything ever happens, everything's in that folder. Don't let anyone sweet-talk you out of what's yours." I opened it now. The papers were crisp, neatly organized. I flipped through each one slowly, like touching memories instead of pages. Property deeds, insurance documents, investment summaries, bank statements. Every one of them still listed me as the primary trustee. That meant no money moved without my signature. Not a dollar. But then I found it. Tucked near the back, a letter from the bank, just dated 3 weeks ago. It was a notification. A request had been submitted to begin partial withdrawal from the trust by Jackson. Attached to that letter was a form with my signature, except it wasn't mine. The loops were too sharp. The slant was off. It looked like someone had practiced it, probably traced it from the birthday cards I used to send Lily. He must have thought I wouldn't notice, that my eyes were too tired, or my memory too soft, that I'd already folded into the background like an old photo left on the shelf. He was wrong. I stared at that forgery for a long time, not because it shocked me, but because of how casual it was, how easy it must have been for him to believe I'd never see it. Or worse, that I wouldn't do anything if I did. He had counted on me being quiet. I folded the papers neatly, placed them into a new envelope, and sealed it. Then I set it next to my tea mug and just sat there, breathing. He thought I was slipping, but I remembered everything, especially this. The next morning, I called Kendrick Shaw from my old landline, the kind with the coiled cord that always gets tangled in the flour bag. Mark had insisted on keeping it. In case the cell towers ever go out, he'd said. I used to laugh, but that morning, it was the most comforting thing I had. Solid, reliable, unmoving. Kendrick answered on the second ring. His voice hadn't changed. Still that deep, lawyerly tone, with just enough softness to make you feel like you weren't completely alone in the world. I didn't give him the whole story. Just said, I need to come by. He gave me a time. Didn't ask why. That's the thing about people who've known you long enough to see behind the curtain. They don't push. They just show up on time. I took the bus into Raleigh that afternoon. The sky was overcast, but not heavy. One of those soft gray days where even the wind seems to be holding its breath. Kendrick's office sat between a law library and a post office, tucked under a faded green awning with peeling gold letters. I hadn't been there since the week after Mark's funeral. He opened the door before I could knock, nodded once, and stepped aside. Inside, the office hadn't changed. Same brown leather chairs. Same dusty bookshelf with the crooked spine on the tax code manual. Same painting of the forest path with the leaves turning gold. Mark had picked that one. Said it reminded him of walking home from school with his little sister. I never liked it. Too quiet. Too lonely. But that day, it felt right. I handed Kendrick the forged letter. He didn't even blink. You remember the clause we added to the trust documents? He asked, already reaching into the bottom drawer. I remember every word, I said. Mark had been insistent about it. If any beneficiary ever tried to manipulate the trust, through coercion, forgery, or pressure, the trust would immediately freeze, permanently, unless reinstated by unanimous vote of two named advisors. Both those advisors were long gone. One had passed the year Mark did. The other moved to Arizona and cut all ties. Kendrick pulled out a red folder marked with Mark's initials and flipped to the addendum. It was still there, signed, sealed, and as powerful as the day it was created. All we need is your written notice and proof, Kendrick said. You've got both. He placed the paper in front of me and handed me a pen. I signed it slow, carefully. My name didn't look like it did 20 years ago, but it was mine, and it was enough. Kendrick made the call. His voice didn't change. No theatrics, just firm, clear, and absolute. By the time he hung up, the trust account was frozen. Access revoked. No withdrawals. No changes. No notifications to Jackson until after review. I leaned back in the chair and looked at the painting again. For the first time, the path didn't seem sad. It seemed earned, like I'd walked it, survived it. Kendrick didn't say much after that, just nodded, locked the folder back in the drawer, and walked me to the door. His hand rested on my shoulder for a moment, just enough to steady me, not enough to pity me. Outside, the wind had picked up. I pulled my coat close and started walking. My steps felt heavier, but they were mine again. I didn't take off my shoes when I got home, didn't even bother hanging my coat. I just walked straight to the kitchen table, the one with the chipped corner and a water ring that's older than Lily. I placed Kendrick's envelope on top of my notepad, smoothed the crease in the flap, and stared at it like it might open itself and whisper, "You did it." But it didn't, because life isn't that theatrical. It's quieter, more matter-of-fact. I sat down and turned on the old desk lamp, that little brass thing Mark got for me back when I took bookkeeping classes at the community center. It still flickered if I bumped the cord just right, but it worked, so I bumped it and let it glow. Then I opened my notepad and started writing. Not to Jackson, Not anymore. That part of me, whatever piece still wanted to explain, to reason, to fix, was done. Instead, I wrote to the office of the Inspector General. That's the part Jackson didn't expect. He might have thought the trust clause would stop him, or maybe slow him down. But I'd seen the look in his eyes the last time we spoke. Just before he left me at that train station, that slight tilt of entitlement. Like he still believed I was just a soft old woman who forgot too easily and asked too few questions. So I wrote it all down. The forged signature, the date on the letter, the bank involved, the previous attempt to gain control of my mail and appointments, every instance, every detail, like I was building a case against a stranger. Because maybe that's what he had become. I printed Kendrick's statement, copied the falsified letter, signed it all in blue ink, folded everything into a manila envelope and sealed it shut with a strip of packing tape, not because I didn't trust the glue, because I needed it to feel final. Then I slipped it into my purse and took the long way to the post office. The air that evening had that rare stillness where everything feels paused, like the whole street is waiting for your next breath. The kind of still that feels like an omen, but in a good way. At the post office, the clerk was young. He barely looked up when I asked for tracking, just stamped the envelope and tossed it into the outgoing bin like it wasn't carrying the weight of 30 years. I didn't flinch, just nodded and walked out. Back at home, I reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out my old checkbook. I hadn't used it in months. Everything had gone digital, sure, but I still kept it. The handwriting, the ink, the weight of every dollar spelled out in cursive. It meant something. I wrote 3 checks. One to the retirement fund I'd let lapse when I thought Jackson might need help with Lily's schooling. One to the heating company to prepay my winter bill, just in case my body decided to betray me with one of those deep freezes again. And one to the local literacy foundation, the same one I used to volunteer for before Jackson told me I was too tired to keep up with things like that. Every check felt like a quiet reclaiming, not revenge, just restoration. 2 days later, Kendrick called. Said Jackson had finally reached out. No surprise there. The minute the trust froze and the access logs flagged him, it was only a matter of time. He wanted answers, Kendrick said. I asked what he told him. The truth. That the trust was locked, that the documents were being reviewed, that until further notice, he had no legal standing, no access, and no leverage. Jackson didn't call me, didn't leave a voicemail, but I felt it. That silence. That stunned, wounded silence. The one that says, "How dare you stop me from taking what I thought I already owned?" I knew it well. That week, I went to the bank. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to. I wanted to stand in that lobby, to smell the clean scent of lemon polish on the counters, to look the teller in the eye when I confirmed the account was still under my name. Only my name. The associate was kind. Middle-aged woman with a brooch shaped like a hummingbird. She smiled when she checked the account. "You're still listed as sole trustee, Mrs. Granger," she said. "No changes have been made." I smiled back. Good. I took the confirmation slip and folded it carefully into my coat pocket. It was just a scrap of paper, but my hand stayed on it all the way home, like it might blow away if I let go. That evening, I didn't bother with dinner. Just brewed a cup of chamomile tea and sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, except for the small bulb over the stove. Outside, the street was quiet. Inside, my chest didn't feel tight anymore. No shouting, no drama. Just one simple, powerful fact. He no longer had access to what he once assumed was already his. And I had reclaimed what was always mine. The buzzer rang late Wednesday morning. I was folding towels on the couch, ones I'd line-dried that morning because the air was finally warm again, when the intercom buzzed. It startled me more than it should have. I pressed the button. Yes. Delivery for Ms. Granger. It was a courier. A manila envelope. No return address. Just my name typed clean across the front. I signed without asking questions. I already knew what was inside. Back in the kitchen, I opened it carefully. No dramatic rip, just a clean slice with my scissors. Inside, 2 documents. The first was a letter from Jackson to the review board, 3 pages long, single-spaced, full of defensive language and soft accusations. He claimed I was confused, that I'd forgotten certain conversations. that maybe I hadn't meant to revoke his access, that it was all a misunderstanding. There was no apology, just justification. The second document was worse. An affidavit from a family doctor I hadn't seen in 3 years, dated 6 months ago, but the ink looked fresh. It said nothing definite, just a vague paragraph about age-related forgetfulness and signs of stress. Words that could mean anything, or be bent to mean whatever you wanted. Now here's a quirky fact you don't hear every day. The phrase, diminished capacity, has no universal legal definition. It's like calling someone a little off. It's slippery, dangerous, and exactly what Jackson had tried to exploit. I set both papers down, didn't cry, didn't shake. I just folded them, placed them in a drawer by the microwave, and poured myself another cup of tea. And then the phone rang. The landline, again. 2 new voicemails. The first was routine, a reminder about my physical next week. The second made me stop mid-breath. It was Lily. Her voice was soft, a little high, a little wobbly, like she was trying to whisper in a room where someone else might overhear. "Hi, Grandma. I just wanted to say hi. I miss your cookies. That's all, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Bye." She didn't leave a callback number, didn't say where she was, just hi. It didn't sound like a message she'd been told to leave. It sounded like one she slipped out when no one was watching. I replayed it twice. Then I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of understanding. She wasn't reaching for me. Not yet. She was reaching for a version of me that had been slowly erased from her world. But that version? She's back now. It was Kendrick who suggested we meet in person again. He called early, before I'd even made my tea, and said, "There's something you need to see. Something I didn't want to say over the phone." Now, Kendrick's not the dramatic type. If he says, "Come in," you come in. So I did. I put on my slacks, that soft white blouse I always save for city errands, and the necklace with the tiny bird charm that Mark gave me one anniversary when we were too broke for anything else. The air that morning felt hesitant, like it hadn't made up its mind whether to be warm or cold, the kind of air that makes your shoulders hunch slightly without you realizing it. I caught the bus downtown, the same one I used to take to the library when Jackson was little. I'd ride it with him sleeping in a sling on my chest, his tiny fist tangled in my collar. Back then, the bus had been part of our rhythm. Now, it felt more like a confession, each stop announcing a part of my life I hadn't walked through in a while. Kendrick met me at the front door of his office with that same nod. We didn't hug. We don't really do that. There's something stronger in being led into someone's space without fanfare. He led me into his office. I sat in the same chair I always sat in, the one near the window with a view of the post office. Kendrick placed a manila folder on the table between us, then took a deep breath. "I think you already know what's in here," he said. I opened it anyway. Emails. Dozens of them. Most from Jackson, a few from someone at the bank, one from a lawyer I didn't recognize. They circled around the same subject, access. Words like compliance, transition planning, streamlining, a lot of talk about her, as if I didn't have a name, as if I wasn't reading this from a real chair in a real room with real skin and real memories. Kendrick tapped one email in particular. "This was sent 2 weeks before he called you about Lily's birthday," he said. In that email, Jackson outlined what he referred to as a soft pivot. He wrote that he was working on easing her into a dependent position, and that the upcoming visit would be a great opportunity to test her cooperation. It was like reading a project proposal, except the project was me. He hadn't just hoped I'd fade. He'd planned it. The invitation, the train station, the timing. None of it was accidental. He'd built an entire strategy around making me disappear gently, like pulling a tablecloth from under the dishes and hoping nothing spills. Kendrick watched me, waited. But I didn't cry. I didn't clutch my chest or gasp. I just said, "So it was never about Lily." "No," Kendrick said. "It wasn't." We sat in silence for a while. The kind that's not awkward. It's reverent. Like both of us knew something sacred had just been broken and it needed room. Eventually, Kendrick said, "The bank's review is complete. There's enough to disqualify him, but it's your call whether we escalate." I nodded, let the words fall into my chest and settle. Then he added, "Another institution reached out. Apparently, he tried to shift assets using his firm's credentials. Of course he did. Because when people like Jackson lose access, they don't reflect. They reroute. I closed the folder and held it in my lap. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like confirmation. That little voice inside me, the one that had been whispering for months, "You're not crazy. You're not imagining this. He's trying to erase you," had been right. We didn't talk much after that. Kendrick walked me to the door, placed a steady hand on my shoulder again, and just waited for me to breathe. Not to be okay, just to breathe. I carried the folder home like it was a flame, not because it burned, but because I knew how quickly it could spread if I let it. I didn't open it again that day. I just placed it on the counter, next to the basket of apples and the envelope with my last will revisions. Then I made a cup of mint tea and leaned against the sink, watching the wind press against the old maple out front. The leaves had started to turn. I didn't know what I felt. Not sadness, not anger. Something like arrival. The knock came around 6. 3 short taps. Not urgent, not timid, just measured. I stayed on the couch. The only light in the apartment was from the kitchen, just the overhead glow humming against the silence. I looked through the peephole. It was Jackson. He wore a suit jacket, slightly wrinkled, held his phone in one hand and an envelope in the other. Shoulders back, chin lifted. The posture of a man who's about to pitch a deal he doesn't fully believe in. He knocked again, this time softer. Then he waited. No shifting, no pacing, just stillness. Eventually, he sighed, crouched slightly, and slid the envelope under the door. And then, nothing. No goodbye. No, Mom, it's me. Just silence. I waited 10 full minutes, then picked it up. Inside was a letter, handwritten, neat, careful, like someone had taken a long time crafting something they hoped would sound honest. He said he'd made mistakes, that he'd overstepped it, that his intention was always to protect me. From confusion, from the stress of managing finances, from the isolation of responsibility. He never once said the word forgery, never mentioned the false letter, just danced around it like it was a ghost only I could see. He asked to meet, said he wanted to talk face to face, that we should clear the air. I folded the letter and slid it into the drawer by the front door. Not out of bitterness, out of finality. I wasn't playing chess anymore. The game was over. The next morning, I took the bus back to Kendrick's office, signed the updated documents. Full revocation of Jackson's access, reassignment of secondary beneficiary, Emily's name removed, for now. Kendrick said I could reinstate her someday, that there was room for a different ending if she ever decided to write one. I nodded. I didn't feel powerful. I felt finished. The notary stamped each page. The ink smelled sharp and permanent, like a line drawn in sand with no tide coming to wash it away. On the way home, I passed the old park bench where I used to sit with Emily. We'd feed ducks, count clouds, make up stories about squirrels. I didn't stop, didn't even glance, just walked past it. The air was clear. My steps felt quiet but complete. That night, I made soup. Not out of grief, not out of celebration, just because soup was what my body asked for. And for once, I listened. The soup was simple, just lentils, carrots, onion, and rosemary from the little pot on my kitchen windowsill. Nothing fancy, but there was something sacred in the act of making something for no one but myself. I stood at the stove and stirred slowly, the way Mark used to do when he was pretending he didn't like to cook. He'd hum sometimes, not a song, just a string of notes that didn't go anywhere in particular. That night, I hummed too. After dinner, I didn't check the mailbox, didn't scroll through voicemails. Some doors, once shut, should stay that way, even if someone's out there jiggling the handle. Instead, I went to bed early. Not because I was tired, but because I wasn't. I didn't need anything from the dark anymore. No answers, no dreams, no apologies. And for the first time in a very long while, I slept through the whole night without waking up once. The next morning, the light was soft and gray, the kind of morning that used to make me want to call in sick to work and stay under the covers with a book. I didn't reach for a book, though. I reached for my blazer, pressed navy, one silver button missing, but it still held shape. The one I used to wear to parent-teacher conferences and bank meetings, and once, awkwardly, to Jackson's 5th grade spelling bee. He won, by the way. The word was conscience. Funny how the irony lands years later. I caught the bus downtown again. Kendrick had already prepped the final round of paperwork. This wasn't just about removing Jackson anymore. It was about setting a new path entirely. When I arrived, the bank manager greeted me herself. A woman named Tara. Warm smile, clear eyes, younger than me by at least 2 decades, but with the kind of calm that made you feel like everything was already handled. She led me to her office, frosted glass walls, clean desk, a little ceramic cat near the monitor, white, with one paw raised like it was waving forever. She opened the folder Kendrick had sent. Closure of joint access, consolidation of assets under my name, transfer of investment funds into a new, single-party account. No alerts? She asked gently. No alerts, I said. Let him find out the way I did. In silence, she nodded and stamped the final page. That's everything, she said, sliding the folder toward me. You're now in full control. Control. Such a simple word, but it lands different when you've spent months being made to feel like you'd lost it. I thanked her and left the bank with the folder pressed against my chest like a borrowed book from a library I wasn't sure I'd ever return to. On the way home, I stopped at a bakery, a little corner place I'd passed dozens of times but never stepped inside. I bought a single apple tart, still warm. The woman behind the counter didn't know my story, didn't ask for it. She wrapped the tart carefully, slid a napkin into the bag without me asking, and handed it over with a smile. Treat yourself, she said. I smiled back. I already am. I walked the long way home, eating the tart slowly from the paper bag as I passed storefronts and early autumn leaves skittering across the sidewalk. The crust flaked perfectly. It didn't crumble, just held together until the very last bite. That afternoon, I opened a new account. Not at the bank Jackson knew. Not at any branch Emily had ever walked into. A new one. Fresh, untouched. It felt like setting a boundary without saying a word. Not to hide, as out to protect. There's a difference, and women my age know it by heart. That evening, I poured myself a glass of cold water, leaned against the sink, and watched the street below. Lights blinked red, then green, then red again. People moved forward without even thinking about it. So did I. The days that followed were quiet. No calls, no knocks, no dramatic letters or breathless apologies. Just silence, and I liked it. I went back to the bookshop the next week. Ruthie was at the counter as usual, her denim jacket sleeves rolled up, reading a paperback with a broken spine. She didn't say much, just looked up, smiled, and handed me a mug of tea before I even asked. The same bitter blend. This time, it didn't startle me. I'd grown into its taste. I sat in the same armchair by the window. This time, I brought my own book. A novel I'd loved when I was younger but had forgotten about during the years when other people's needs filled my calendar. It was like visiting an old friend who'd kept your seat warm. I read slowly, one chapter at a time, letting the story rebuild something soft in me. Later that afternoon, I stopped by the market, picked up fresh basil, tomatoes, and a small wedge of Parmesan. I hadn't made a full dinner in weeks, but that night, I did. Not for Jackson, not for Lily, not for anyone else's schedule or celebration. Just for me, pasta with garlic and fresh herbs. A slice of sourdough from the corner bakery. No candle, no playlist, no audience. And yet it felt like a ceremony. The kitchen smelled like possibility. Before bed, I opened the window, let the cold air move through the space. Clean and sharp and unapologetic. It swept through like it was clearing out the last of him. And when it settled, the apartment didn't feel empty. It felt restored. I found Jackson's last letter the next morning, still folded in the drawer by the door. I took it out, looked at it for a long while, then placed it in the back of the filing cabinet with the other legal documents. Not to cherish, not even to revisit, just to remember what survival looks like on paper. Some things don't need burning. Some things just need to be filed away. That afternoon, I walked past the train station, the same one where he left me standing with my suitcase and a handful of hope. This time, I didn't stop, didn't glance at the benches or the timetable. I kept walking, eyes forward, back straight, because I wasn't that woman anymore, not the one waiting, not the one wondering, and not the one who gets left behind. The thing about reclaiming your life in pieces is that at first, you don't realize you're doing it. You just start saying no more often. You throw out the things you used to keep just in case. You stop flinching when the phone rings, and one day you realize you're not waiting anymore. That morning, I woke up early. No alarm, just the soft light curling through the blinds like it was there to check in on me. I made coffee, not tea. Coffee, real, strong, gritty stuff in a French press I hadn't used since Mark passed. I poured it into the chipped mug with the red poppies on the side, the one Jackson painted for me when he was 7 and still thought I was magic. I didn't cry looking at it. I didn't smile either. I just held it like something warm and familiar that didn't ask anything of me. Then I sat down at the table and wrote a grocery list. Not just any list, a real one. With meals in mind, with purpose. That afternoon, I planned to make cornbread, and not because anyone was coming over, just because I liked the smell of it in the oven. There's a certain kind of joy in doing things solely for yourself. It doesn't come loud. It arrives quietly, like the feeling of slipping into socks still warm from the dryer. Later, I stopped by Ruthie's bookshop again. She had a new stack of used titles on the front table. I picked up a memoir, flipped through the first few pages, and saw a line underlined in pencil. Sometimes being unseen is safer, but safer doesn't always mean better. I bought it without a second thought. Back at the counter, Ruthie gave me that sideways grin of hers. "You've got your walk back," she said. "My what?" "Your walk. It's yours again." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and placed my change in the tip jar. On the way home, I passed the community center and saw a sign in the window. Volunteers needed. Adult literacy tutors. It stopped me in my tracks. For years, I'd given up things like that. Stepped back. "Too tired," Jackson used to say. "Too much effort." But he was wrong. What drains you isn't doing the work. It's being made to feel like you can't. So I went inside, filled out a form, and scheduled an orientation. The young woman behind the desk, Nina, smiled when I handed it in. "We've been hoping for someone like you," she said. That night, I went through an old storage bin in the hall closet, pulled out the photo albums I hadn't touched in years, the ones with cracked leather edges and faded Scotch tape across the covers. I flipped through slowly. There was Jackson, age 6, holding a fishing rod twice his size. There he was at 13, tall and lanky, holding Lily on his lap while she slept, mouth wide open like babies do when they've got the whole world wrapped in their tiny fists. And there I was, in every frame, wearing the same hopeful smile, the kind that quietly says, "I'm trying, I'm here, I'm doing my best, even when it's breaking me." I didn't cry. I didn't toss the album away either. I closed it gently and slid it back into the bin. Some stories are best kept as they were. Truthful, unedited, but not on display. A few days later, I received a small card in the mail. No return address. Just my name written in neat cursive. Inside was a note. "Grandma, I know something happened. I don't know what, but I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I miss you. Love, Lily." That's all it said. No phone number, no email, just those lines. I held that card like a secret, like something that still had a pulse. I didn't write back, not yet, because love, real love, doesn't rush, and it doesn't come with terms. I wasn't ready to offer comfort when all I had was questions. But I put the card on the fridge, pinned it with a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Every time I reached for milk or eggs, it reminded me, she's still in there. Later that week, I bumped into an old neighbor at the market, Catherine, from 2 doors down in the old building I left 3 years ago. She squinted for a second, then smiled wide. "Lorraine Granger, is that you?" I laughed. "Depends who's asking." She leaned in, whispered, "I heard about Jackson. That boy's always been slicker than he should be." I didn't confirm or deny anything, just said, "Turns out being underestimated has its perks." Catherine winked. "Good for you, honey. You always had more grit than gold." It stuck with me, that phrase. More grit than gold. That's how I'd like to be remembered. A few nights later, I walked to the little theater off Main Street, the one that plays old movies for $5 and gives you free popcorn if you bring your own bowl. I brought my popcorn tin, the same one Mark and I used every Friday night when we were young and broke and more in love than tired. The movie was To Kill a Mockingbird, black and white, gentle pacing, not for everyone. but it was enough. I sat near the back, coat folded across my lap, eyes fixed on the screen. No phone, no whispers, just story. And in that quiet theater, surrounded by strangers, I felt more connected than I had in months. Because sometimes healing looks like a movie you've already seen, and it still moves you. That night, walking home under the soft flicker of street lamps, I paused outside my apartment building and looked up. The windows glowed like old lanterns. Inside, my life waited. No sun hovering, no lies circling like flies. Just me, with a loaf of banana bread in my tote bag, 2 new books on my nightstand, and a peace I'd earned one choice at a time. I stepped inside and locked the door behind me, not to keep anything out. But because I finally liked what was in, I spent the next few days exactly the way I wanted. Quietly, deliberately, without anyone checking in to ask why. It's funny how much of a luxury that becomes in your later years. Just choosing your pace. Not just with walking, but with life. Each morning, I'd open the windows, just a crack, let in the air, even if it was chilly. There's something about a cold breeze brushing across your kitchen table that makes the day feel like it belongs to you, even if it's a Tuesday. I started making soup again, too. Different kinds this time. Potato leek, butternut squash. I even tried a lentil curry recipe from a woman named Elena I met at the market. She handed it to me, scribbled on the back of a grocery receipt, and said, "Just enough spice to make you feel like you've been somewhere." She was right. That curry nearly made me cry, but not from emotion, from heat. I had to drink 2 glasses of milk to settle my throat, but I made it again the next week anyway. Sometimes flavor is a reminder that you're still here. One afternoon, I got a call from the literacy center. Nina's voice on the other end was full of nerves and hope. "We had a tutor drop out last minute," she said. "Think you'd be ready to take on a student?" I paused, not because I didn't want to, but because it had been a long time since anyone asked me for help without strings attached. "Of course," I said. She told me his name was Arthur, mid-60s, grew up on a farm, left school at 13, never learned to read more than a cereal box. "He's a little stubborn," she added, almost like a warning. "Then we'll get along just fine," I said. Arthur wore denim overalls and a worn cap the first day we met. Sat across from me like he was bracing for impact. His hands stayed folded tightly in his lap, thumbs circling each other over and over like they were trying to dig a way out. He didn't look me in the eye, didn't speak much either, just grunted when I asked him his name and nodded when I showed him the workbook. We started with small things, letters, then sounds, then shapes that led to words. He didn't say anything for the first 10 minutes, but when I asked him to read the word cat, he said, "You're gonna laugh." I looked him dead in the eyes and said, "Only if you spell it with a K." That cracked him just a little, just enough. By the end of the hour, he read the word out loud and whispered, "Well, I'll be damned." I pretended not to hear the curse, but I heard the pride. That kind of moment sticks with you, not because it's loud, but because it's real. The days kept stacking, not heavy like before, not like weights around my neck, more like books on a shelf, each one with its own story. Some light, some hard, but all mine. Every now and then, I'd think about Jackson, not in that aching, raw way, more like a memory you walk past in a hallway, glance at, nod to, and keep going. I didn't check for more letters, didn't ask Kendrick for updates. He'd had his time. Now, I was having mine. And not in some grand, cinematic way. No makeovers, no world tours, just life. A good tomato, a sharp pencil, a quiet night with your feet up, and a dog-eared book in your lap. That's the kind of freedom no one talks about when you get older. The kind you earn by losing things you once thought you couldn't live without. One Sunday morning, Ruthie asked me to help her open the bookshop. She'd pulled her back moving a box of old dictionaries, and as she put it, "I've got more words than strength these days." We arrived early, just as the sun started painting golden stripes across the sidewalk. She handed me the keys, said, "You ever opened a door like this before?" I said, "Only the metaphorical kind." We both laughed. Inside, the air was still, the kind of quiet that settles in overnight and waits to be stirred. I dusted the front shelves while she brewed the tea. We didn't talk much, just moved around each other like 2 old songs playing in harmony. At one point, she handed me a notebook. "Here," she said. "You ever want to write something down? This one's for you." It was nothing special, just a blank journal with a soft green cover and a few pages already creased from handling. But when she handed it to me, I held it like it had weight. Not because it was heavy, because it meant something. It meant someone still believed I had more to say. That night, I sat by the window with that notebook in my lap. The sky outside had turned purple, streaked with orange like a bruise healing backwards. I didn't know what to write at first. Then I put down one sentence. The story isn't over just because someone else walked out of it. I underlined it twice. That's the line I would have told myself a year ago. That's the line I would have whispered to the woman standing at that train station with hope folded inside her purse. And now? Now I didn't need to whisper it. I could say it out loud. Because I believed it. Because I was living it. And maybe, just maybe, someone else needed to hear it too. I left the notebook open on the table. Let the words stay visible. Let them sit in the room with me, not hidden away. Because that's what healing looks like sometimes. Not a scar, not a speech, just one sentence, written in your own handwriting, reminding you that you're still here. And you're still the one holding the pen. The first time I walked past my old apartment building again, I didn't plan to. I had taken the long route home from the market, carrying a bag of fresh plums and rosemary, when I turned a corner and there it was, unchanged. Same chipped bricks, same black metal stair rail with the loose bolt near the second-floor landing that wobbled if you leaned too hard. I paused across the street, stood in the shadow of a laundromat, and watched. Not for long, just enough to remember. That's where Jackson learned to ride his bike, right there on that cracked sidewalk, with me jogging behind, breathless and laughing, arms outstretched in case he fell. He didn't, though. He kept going, legs pumping, voice rising like he could ride into the sky if he wanted. Funny how a place can hold your happiest memory and still feel cold now. A woman came out the front door then, maybe in her 30s, hair pulled up, a baby on her hip. She didn't look like she was rushing, just stepping into another ordinary day. I wondered if she had any idea the ghosts living in that stairwell. The joy, the disappointment, the burned toast on Sunday mornings, the letters slipped under the door, the quiet tears behind the bathroom sink. Probably not, and that's okay. She gets to make her own story now. I turned and walked away, didn't look back, not even once. That evening, I stopped at the community center again. Nina waved me into the office with a bright smile. "Arthur's waiting," she said. He sat at the same table, cap in his lap this time, workbook already open to page 34. "Did the homework?" he grunted, then cleared his throat. "Some of it." I laughed. "You say that like you failed." He shrugged. "Just feels weird, that's all." "What does?" "Succeeding." I sat across from him and said, "You get used to it, eventually." We read a short story together, one about a fisherman who keeps losing his line, only to realize it's not the fish that's pulling, it's the current. Arthur paused at the end and asked, "You ever feel like that? Like you've been blaming the wrong thing?" I thought about Jackson, about the years I spent blaming myself, blaming Mark, even blaming age. All the while, it was the current. Not a storm, not a betrayal, just a slow, invisible pull in the wrong direction. "Yeah," I said softly. "I have..." He nodded and looked down again, underlining a word without being asked. We kept reading. Later that night, I made a lemon cake. No occasion, just because the lemons were starting to wrinkle, and I figured I owed them a good ending. The kitchen filled with that buttery citrus smell that makes you feel like your grandma is about to walk in and ask why you're still wearing shoes indoors. I sliced it while it was still warm, sat down with a piece and a mug of sleepy time tea. No one else around, no one to impress, just me, and that soft moment of satisfaction when a cake comes out just right. A few days passed, quietly, gently, until Saturday afternoon. That's when the knock came. Not at the door, at my email. The name that popped up made my chest catch, not in fear, in memory. Emily. The subject line was just, "Hi," and inside, a short message. "I've been thinking about you. I don't know what happened exactly, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have called. I should have asked more questions. I miss you. Do you think we could talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time. There was no attachment, No signature line with job titles and phone numbers. Just her name. Just her voice in digital ink, reaching across a silence we didn't create, but had both been living inside. I didn't respond right away. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street below. The trees had started to turn, little bursts of gold and copper, shaking loose from their branches like confetti from a party no one attended. I sat down with my tea, let the email sit open. Eventually, I typed back, "Hi, sweetheart. I'm still here. Let's talk soon. No pressure. Just glad to hear from you." Simple, honest. No flood of explanations. Just a light crack in the door, because when trust has been bent, it doesn't swing open. It creaks, then waits. I told Ruthie about it the next day. She was shelving books when I mentioned Emily's message. She paused, turned, and raised an eyebrow. "You gonna see her?" "I don't know yet." "Well," she said, sliding a novel into place, "sometimes the ones who come back are braver than the ones who stay." I didn't say anything to that, just let it hang in the air like a breeze too gentle to name. I spent the afternoon walking around town, stopped at the antique store on Elm, the one that always smells like furniture polish and forgotten stories, found a little glass bird on a dusty shelf. Delicate wings, sharp beak, one tiny chip in the tail. I picked it up, held it against the light, and smiled. I bought it, not because it was valuable, but because it had survived being chipped, and still looked beautiful anyway. That evening, I placed it on my windowsill, right next to the basil pot and my now half-filled journal. I sat down, wrote 2 more pages, this time not about Jackson, or the trust, or the silence, but about Emily, about second chances, and how sometimes the deepest kind of love is the kind that comes back, not to fix, but just to be present. That night, I slept with the windows open. The air smelled like cinnamon from the neighbor's kitchen, and something inside me, something small and steady, felt like it had just exhaled for the first time in a very long while. When Emily and I finally met, it wasn't dramatic. No thunder in the sky, no swelling violins, just a Tuesday afternoon, a quiet park bench, and 2 cups of takeout coffee that were too hot to sip at first. She had texted me that morning, said she was in town for the week, staying with a friend, and if I had time, maybe we could meet somewhere outside. Neutral ground, she wrote, with a little smiley face I hadn't seen from her in years. I picked a park halfway between us, one with big old sycamores, and a little duck pond that never quite froze all the way in winter, the kind of place you bring children when they still believe breadcrumbs matter. She was already sitting when I arrived, her back straight, ankles crossed, hair tucked behind her ears just like her mother used to do when she was trying to look composed. For a second, I saw her at 12 again, curled up in my living room, playing with a deck of old playing cards and humming under her breath. She looked up, met my eyes, and stood. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I replied. We didn't hug right away. Sometimes love comes back slowly. We sat, sipped, listened to the geese honk at each other like old men arguing over parking spots. She spoke first. "I didn't know," she said, "about any of it." "I know. I mean, Dad said you were getting forgetful, that you were having trouble. I believed him." "I understand." She looked down into her coffee. The lid trembled slightly in her hand. "I should have called." "You're here now," I said. "That counts?" She blinked fast, like the air had just gotten dustier somehow. We talked for an hour. Not about money, not about Jackson, just about books and birthdays, and how she hated her new job but loved the dog she adopted last fall. She told me she still had the scarf I knitted her back in college. "The yellow one," she smiled, "with the crooked stripe." I laughed. "That stripe gave it character. You always said that when things weren't perfect." I tilted my head. Still true. She reached into her tote bag and pulled out a folded photo, creased at the corners, edges a little soft. It was of the 3 of us. Me, her, and Jackson. Thanksgiving, maybe 6 years ago. We were all holding forks mid-air, caught mid-laugh. "I miss when it was like this," she said. "I do too," I replied, and let the silence do the rest. After a while, she stood. "Can I see you again? Before I leave town?" "Of course." "I want to make things right," she added, voice small. "You don't have to make anything right," I said. You just have to keep showing up." She nodded, then surprised me with a quick, tight hug. It wasn't long, but it was real. When I got home, I set the photo she gave me on the shelf by the window, next to the glass bird and the basil, right under the little card she'd mailed weeks ago. The one I'd left pinned on the fridge. It all felt quiet, but in a good way, like something that had once been cracked was now just soft around the edges. That night, I pulled out my journal again, wrote a new page, not about Jackson this time, not about what was taken, but what had returned. Sometimes healing doesn't mean returning to what was. It just means opening space for what can still be. I closed the book, slid it under the folded dish towel on the table, and turned off the light. The next morning brought a surprise. A package at my door. Brown paper, taped edges, no return address. I opened it slowly. Inside was a small wooden box. And a letter, not from Jackson, but from Mark, my husband. I sat down hard in the nearest chair, heart caught somewhere between memory and disbelief. The letter was dated nearly 10 years ago, written in his clean, upright hand. If you're reading this, something's gone wrong, or maybe it's just time. Either way, I wanted you to have this. He went on to say that he'd asked Kendrick to hold it, just in case. Said he had a feeling we'd all get a little lost eventually, and this might help. Inside the wooden box were 3 things. A silver necklace, mine, the one I thought I lost the year after he died. A stack of Polaroids from our road trip to Montana, yellowing slightly but still sharp, and a folded document, instructions for a charitable trust I never knew he'd created, titled under both our names. He had quietly arranged for it to fund adult literacy programs in our hometown. I looked closer. It had already been active for 3 years. Under Ruthie's bookstore address, I covered my mouth with one hand. Ruthie knew. She knew. That quiet, sly fox had been handing me purpose disguised as tea and tattered books. I walked to her shop that afternoon, the wooden box tucked under my arm. When I pushed open the door, she looked up from the register and said, "Took you long enough. You could have told me, and robbed you of the moment you just had." I shook my head, half smiling. "You're impossible. And you're stubborn. We're even." We didn't talk much after that, just shared a pot of tea, the same bitter kind. But this time, it tasted like hope. Later that night, I sat on the porch with the box in my lap, stars blinking quietly overhead. I thought about Mark, about how he saw something in me that even I forgot was there. I whispered a soft "thank you" into the night, then tucked the box inside, placed it under my bed, and lay down feeling more whole than I had in years. He'd given me something I didn't even know I still needed. Not money, not memory, but continuity, a thread I could hold on to, and maybe pass forward. The following Sunday, I stood behind the folding table at the community center's open house, passing out pamphlets for the adult literacy program with Arthur by my side. He wore a clean button-down, same cap, but this time it had been brushed, and he looked about 3 inches taller than usual. Confidence'll do that to a man. I had made lemon bars for the occasion, not perfect, a little too crumbly, but people kept coming back for seconds. One man asked if I sold them. I laughed and said, "Only to people willing to learn vowel sounds." Arthur elbowed me gently. "You should have been a comedian." "Too late," I replied. "I missed the stage." We both chuckled, but under it was something warm. That kind of laughter only comes when you know the worst parts of your story are behind you, and they didn't win. The turnout that day wasn't huge, maybe 24 folks, but it was steady. Steady's good. I've learned that slow momentum is still momentum, and sometimes it's the kind that sticks. Emily showed up midway through. I hadn't expected her. She didn't text or call, just appeared in the doorway holding a to-go coffee cup and a soft uncertainty in her shoulders. I waved her over. Arthur, ever the gentleman, stood to shake her hand. "You must be the famous granddaughter," he said. Emily smiled, unsure. "Infamous, maybe?" I gave her a look. "Don't start. You're here, and that matters more than anything." We talked a little, helped a woman find the sign-up sheet for evening classes. When there was a lull, Emily leaned in and whispered, "I never saw you like this before." "Like what?" "Like someone who still had chapters left." That nearly undid me, but I just squeezed her hand and said, "We're all still writing." That night, I made chili for dinner. The The kind with 3 beans and a heap of cumin, the way Mark used to make it on game days. I never cared much for football, but I always showed up for chili. I set 2 bowls on the table, one for me, one for the memory of who I used to be. Because I wasn't her anymore, but I still honored her. She got me this far. The next day, I walked past the law office and saw Kendrick through the glass, hunched over a file. I stepped inside. He looked up and grinned. "You again? Don't pretend you're not thrilled." "I'm shaking in my loafers." He made coffee while I sat down, flipping through a folder I'd brought from home. I handed him a sheet, a list of names, contacts, ideas. He raised an eyebrow. "What's this?" "I want to start something," I said. "Not just volunteering, something bigger." "You mean a foundation?" "No, smaller, warmer, something in between a shelter and a school. A space for women like me, like Ruthie, like the ones at the shelter I used to visit. Not just to survive, but to rebuild." Kendrick leaned back, considering. "It's not about saving anyone," I added. "It's about reminding them they were never broken." He nodded slowly. "And what would you call it?" I hadn't thought of that. So I looked out the window, saw a single leaf drift from a tree across the street. Soft, steady. Maybe the porch light. Why? Because it means someone's still home. By the following week, Kendrick had already drawn up a draft. Nothing legally binding yet, but a framework. He knew people. He always did. Emily offered to help with branding, design, all that fancy stuff the younger generation does without breaking a sweat. She came over with her laptop and mock-ups, and 3 different color palettes. "I figured it should feel comforting," she said. "Not institutional." I looked at the screen. Soft blues, earth tones, a sketch of a front porch wrapped in ivy. "That's perfect," I told her. And it was, because it didn't scream. It welcomed. Ruthie donated a corner of the bookshop. Said she'd always wanted to clear out the storage area and turn it into a reading nook anyway. "It'll give the place some heart," she added. "You already did that," I told her. She waved a hand. "Yeah, but now it'll have your fingerprints on it." Together, we painted the walls a warm yellow, the kind that makes you feel like it's always morning. We stocked the shelves with donated books, some new, some barely holding together. Arthur brought in a set of alphabet blocks from his grandson's toy box. "Just for the ambiance," he said. It was coming together. Slowly, yes, but beautifully. And I realized something one afternoon while folding hand towels in the tiny makeshift kitchen. I wasn't rebuilding what I lost. I was building what I needed all along. That Friday, the first real snow came. Soft, thick flakes that didn't stick, but still made the world feel quiet. Fresh. I opened the windows just a crack, let the cold air roll in while I lit a candle on the sill. I'd read somewhere that cinnamon triggers memory. I didn't need a trigger. I remembered everything. But now, those memories didn't ache. They hummed, like background music to a story that wasn't over. At least not yet. Later that night, I got a call. It wasn't from Jackson. It was from a woman named Naomi, a friend of Ruthie's from across town. She'd heard about the porch light through the grapevine, said her sister had just gone through a divorce, needed a place to land, maybe help with paperwork, maybe just someone to look her in the eyes and not flinch. "Would it be okay," she asked, "if I brought her by next week?" I paused, not because I had doubts, but because that one question, that small ask, meant it was working. "Yes," I said. "Bring her." And that was it. A new beginning inside another new beginning. The kind you don't announce with balloons. Just a clean mug on the table, a place to sit, and warm light in the window. The first woman to step through the door of the porch light wasn't who I expected. She wore oversized sunglasses and a coat 2 sizes too big, even though it was barely 40 degrees outside. Her name was Marta. She didn't say much when Naomi introduced us, just nodded and hovered near the door like she was afraid it might lock behind her. I offered her a seat by the window and a mug of chamomile. She didn't take off the coat, didn't take off the sunglasses either. That's okay. Some people need layers before they can breathe. She sat for nearly 10 minutes without saying a word, just stared at the bookshelf like it might bite her. Then, in a voice low and scraped raw, she asked, "Is this place for real?" I nodded. "Because I've been to places that say they help, but they don't. They just talk at you." I smiled gently. We don't talk at anyone here. We wait until they're ready. She stared at me like she wasn't sure if I was serious. And then, just a flicker, she exhaled. That was all, but it was a start. Over the next few days, she came back twice. Didn't say much, just sat by the window, reading the same page of a book each time, like she needed the words to memorize her back. I didn't ask questions. I just refilled her tea. Sometimes healing doesn't show up as tears or confessions. Sometimes it just looks like showing up for a third time. Meanwhile, Emily was working late into the night on the website for the Porch Light. She'd send me photos of logo mock-ups, header fonts, bios for Ruthie and me. She even wrote a mission statement without asking. We create safe space for women who were told to sit down. Now they stand. I read it aloud and blinked hard. You wrote that? She smiled through the phone. I had a good role model. Arthur helped install a tiny mailbox by the entrance. Said it could be used for anonymous notes or story prompts or questions people were too afraid to ask out loud. On the first day it went up, someone left a scrap of paper that read, "Do you think it's possible to start over at 57? I wrote back, "Only if you promise not to rush." The weeks passed gently, like waves lapping at a new shoreline. We didn't keep count of visitors, didn't track metrics. That wasn't the point. We kept the tea warm, the books open, the porch light on, and slowly, the chairs began to fill. One woman brought in an old sewing kit and taught others how to mend seams. Another offered free tax prep advice every Thursday afternoon. Ruthie started leading a weekly poetry reading, which surprised me more than anyone. I don't read poetry, I'd said. You will now, she replied, and she was right. One evening, after everyone had left, I stayed behind to sweep the front steps. The streetlights were just flickering on, and the sky had turned that soft lilac color that only lasts a few minutes. That's when I saw the envelope, not under the door, not in the mailbox, but tucked between the pages of a book on the front shelf. It was addressed to me. No stamp, no handwriting I recognized, just one word on the front. Mom. My hands went still, not trembling, just still. I sat on the bench by the window, the porch light behind me casting long shadows across the floor. I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter from Jackson, the real kind, not the legal kind, not the defensive kind. This one was handwritten, unfolded in thirds, words crossed out, smudges in the ink. It read, I've been thinking a lot about what I said, what I didn't say, what I never asked. You raised me with your whole life, and I got used to believing that meant I deserved everything. But I didn't. You gave me more than I ever earned, and when I couldn't use it the way I wanted, I got cruel. You didn't deserve that. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know, I finally see it. I see you. And I hope, if nothing else, you sleep peacefully now. No return address. No phone number. Just his name at the bottom. Jackson. I sat there a long time. The letter on my lap. The porch light humming above me. I didn't cry. Not out of coldness. Out of clarity. He'd finally written something real. Something that didn't ask for anything in return. And that, more than anything, told me he had begun his own path. Maybe not toward me, but at least away from the boy who thought love meant control. I tucked the letter into the back of my notebook. Didn't burn it. Didn't frame it. Just kept it. Because some apologies don't need celebration. They just need somewhere to rest. That weekend, we held a small gathering at the porch light. Nothing fancy, just cider and quilts and stories, one by one. Women stood to read poems, share memories, whisper truths into a room that didn't flinch. When it was my turn, I stood with my hands clasped and read something I'd written the night before. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You don't have to be young to begin again. And you don't have to be loved by everyone to be worthy of love. When I looked up, the room was still. Silent. Full. Then softly, someone clapped. Then another. And another. And the sound of it wrapped around me like a quilt stitched by every woman who had ever been told to lower her voice. Afterward, Emily hugged me hard. Not the cautious kind. The full, both arms kind. You're kind of a legend now, she whispered. I smiled. Only because I lived long enough to write the ending myself. The first snow that stuck came on a Tuesday morning. Not the soft, flurry kind either. The heavy, wet snow that silences everything like the world's trying to listen more closely. I opened the curtains and watched it layer the sidewalk, inch by inch, like someone gently tucking in the street for a nap. The porch light was closed that day. Power had flickered twice the night before, and Ruthie and I decided no one needed to slip and fall on the way to a book and a cup of tea. So I stayed home, curled beneath my quilt with the heat on low and the scent of rosemary bread lingering from the night before. You'd think snow days feel lonely, especially for someone who lives alone. But the truth is, sometimes they feel like permission. Permission to be still, to stay in pajamas, to watch a cardinal hop across the railing and pretend it's a sign of something meaningful. Mid-morning, the doorbell rang. I nearly didn't answer it. It's not like I was expecting anyone, but I shuffled to the door, robe tied, slippers half dragging. It was a delivery driver, half soaked, holding a small cardboard box wrapped in plain brown tape. "Lorraine Cooper?" he asked. "That's me," I said. "Signature here," he said, thrusting a damp tablet at me. His gloves were fingerless. I signed. He nodded and jogged back to his van. I closed the door and stared at the box a second longer than necessary. There was no return label, just my name, again, typed in small, neat letters. I brought it to the kitchen, set it on the counter next to my cold mug of coffee, and opened it carefully with the same letter opener I once used to slice open Jackson's fabricated power of attorney form. Inside, a snow globe and a note. I blinked twice before I picked it up. The snow globe was simple, a tiny cabin, nestled in fake pine trees, glitter instead of snow. And the note? It read, "This used to sit on your desk when I was a kid. I used to shake it until the glitter got stuck at the top, just to watch it fall all at once. I didn't understand back then that what I thought was beautiful was really just chaos. You always told me not to shake it too hard. I'm sorry I didn't listen sooner. No signature this time. But I didn't need one." I held the snow globe in both hands, turned it gently, watched the glitter swirl, slow and even. No storm this time, just settling. Later, I brought it to the porch light, placed it on the front desk, next to the basket of bookmarks and the bell that barely rings. Ruthie noticed it right away. "New decoration?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. She didn't press. She never does. That afternoon, Marta came by again. She took off her coat this time, still kept the sunglasses on, but her voice was stronger. She told me about her cat, the one she left behind when she moved out of the apartment in the middle of the night. "He was old," she said. "Wouldn't have made the trip." I nodded. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is leave something behind so we can move forward. She looked at me like she didn't quite believe it yet, but maybe, just maybe, she wanted to. Before she left, she slipped a folded paper into the mailbox on the wall. After she was gone, I opened it. 3 words, "Thank you anyway." It hit harder than a dozen poems, because anyway carries weight. It means, even when I'm scared, even when I don't believe yet, even when I can't say more than this. That evening, I cooked for the first time in weeks. A real meal. Roasted squash, wild rice, a small chicken seasoned just the way Mark used to, paprika, rosemary, lemon tucked inside. I set the table, 1 plate, 1 fork, 1 cloth napkin, not because I was lonely, but because I had earned the ritual again. I even lit a candle. Soft glow, quiet light. I ate slowly, chewing with intention, tasting the layers like they were old friends. When I washed the dishes, I didn't rush. And when I wiped down the counters, I didn't skip the corners. Because a home, even a small one, deserves to be treated like someone might still come back to it someday. 2 days later, the website went live. Emily called to walk me through it. "Don't click too fast," she warned. "The mobile version's a little touchy." I clicked too fast anyway, but the page loaded. Soft blue background. A sketch of a front porch at dusk. The words, "The porch light. Come as you are. Stay as long as you need." Below that, a photo. Me, Ruthie, Arthur, even Marta, off to the side. Half turned away but not hiding. We looked like a mismatched choir, but we looked like home. Emily said donations were already coming in. I asked where they were from. She paused. "Everywhere," she said. "Someone posted a clip of your poem. It's been shared over 100,000 times." I laughed. That's more than I made lemon bars. She smiled through the line. "You're kind of a big deal now." I shook my head. "Nah, I'm just a woman with a broom and a key to the front door." But part of me, just a small part, stood a little taller. Not for the praise, but because I hadn't asked for any of it. I had simply stayed. The next morning, I went back to the park. The one where Emily and I had shared that first awkward coffee months ago. The snow had mostly melted, leaving small patches along the edges. I sat on the same bench, opened my journal, and started writing again. Not about Jackson, not about Emily, not about loss. I wrote about beginnings, tiny ones, invisible ones, the kind you don't see until someone leaves a thank you on a scrap of paper and walks away lighter. Behind me, the street light flickered on. It was too early for that, but I didn't mind, because maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, someone saw it through their window and thought, "That porch light is still on." 3 months after the porch light opened, I found myself sitting in a folding chair beside Ruthie, holding a paper plate of lukewarm quiche and watching a woman named Denise teach a small group how to bind old books with thread. It wasn't an official class, just one of those things that happen when you leave space for people to share what they know. Denise used to be a librarian before her husband passed. Said she'd forgotten how good it felt to teach. Her voice had that particular kind of calm, the one that makes you want to slow your breathing and listen all the way through. I watched as women with shaky fingers and unsure eyes leaned closer to see the stitching. Each time one of them got frustrated, Denise would place her own hands gently over theirs, not correcting, just guiding. Ruthie nudged me. "You seeing this?" I nodded. "Feels like church," she whispered. It did. No choir, no sermon, but the kind of silence that wraps around you and says, "You belong here." After class, I stayed behind to help clean up. Arthur swept the floor with his usual flair, whistling an off-key tune that made me laugh every time he looped past. He stopped long enough to hand me a folded flyer. "Got this in the mail," he said. "Thought you should see." It was from a regional nonprofit network. They were inviting this porch light to be featured in their annual community initiative campaign. There'd be a write-up, a video segment, even a small grant attached. "We're gonna be on TV," Arthur said, puffing up a bit. I smiled but felt a small knot in my chest. Not fear, just awe. It's strange when something you built out of grief and hope starts growing past the size of your hands. I folded the flyer carefully and slipped it into my purse. "Let's keep the focus on the work," I told him. He grinned. "Sure, but I still think we ought to get matching t-shirts." Later that night, Emily stopped by with a bag of leftover Thai food and a tired look. "I needed a quiet place," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "And yours always smells like something real." We ate in the kitchen, the overhead light casting a warm circle on the table. The noodles were cold, but I didn't mind. After we ate, she pulled out her laptop and showed me a draft of a letter she was writing. For herself. Not for school, not for work, just to say some things out loud. She had been thinking about reaching out to her dad, not for answers, not for apologies, just for her own peace. "I'm not asking for his approval anymore," she said. "I just want him to know he didn't erase me." I nodded slowly. "That's a good reason," I said. And it was, because sometimes we don't need closure. We need a witness, someone to say, "Yes, that happened, and yes, you're still here." That weekend, I sat down to write something of my own. A letter, yes, but not to Jackson. Not even to Mark. I wrote to the women I hadn't met yet, the ones who would walk through the porch light months from now with bags under their eyes and silence in their throats. I wrote, "If you're reading this, you've already survived something, and if you're sitting here now, it means you still believe in the possibility of warmth. You don't have to tell your whole story. You don't have to start over. You just have to sit down. Let the chair hold you for a while. You are allowed to rest." I folded the letter and placed it in the little box near the tea kettle labeled, "Open when you forget." Ruthie added her own note to it later. Arthur wrote one too, and just like that, we had a drawer full of tiny reminders, quiet sentences for tired souls. Spring came slowly that year, not with a bang, but with small kindnesses. Crocuses pushing up through cracks in the sidewalk, windows open just a little longer, birdsong sneaking in before the alarm. One morning, as I opened the shop, I found a new note in the mailbox. This one in pencil. It said, I didn't know this kind of place could exist. Underneath it, smaller handwriting added, "But now that I know, I think I might be okay." I stood there for a long time holding that paper, long enough for the tea kettle to whistle, long enough for the bell above the door to ring as the first visitor walked in. I tucked the note into my coat pocket and welcomed them with a smile. No big speeches, just the same words I always said. "Come on in. Sit where you like. There's fresh tea by the window." Later that afternoon, as I wiped down the tables, I looked out the front window and saw a boy walking past with his mother. The kid couldn't have been more than 7. He had a backpack that bounced with each step and a head full of questions, judging by the way his hands kept moving as he talked. The mom looked tired, but she was nodding, listening, and I thought, let them keep that. Let that boy grow up believing his voice mattered. Let that woman grow into her years without being erased. I didn't know their names, but I whispered a wish for them anyway, because the world turns quietly, even when we're not watching. And sometimes, the smallest hopes are the ones that take root. That night, I swept the front porch slowly. The wind had picked up again, scattering leaves across the steps. I didn't mind. I swept, and I hummed. And when I looked up, I saw Ruthie watching me through the window. She lifted her tea in salute. I raised my broom. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to, because we were home. And the light was still on. The porch light turned 1 year old in early fall. We didn't throw a party. No balloons, no cake, no special banner across the front window. Instead, we did what we always did. Opened the door, put the kettle on, and made space for whoever needed to come in from the wind. But still, that morning felt different. The air had a certain crispness to it, the kind that makes you feel like you're walking inside a memory. And when I arrived, someone had left a small pot of mums on the front step. No card, just the flowers, deep burgundy, blooming like they knew exactly where they were. I brought them inside and set them on the corner table. Sometimes, thank you doesn't need a name. Later that week, we received a letter from a woman named Angela. She had never visited the porch light. She lived 2 states away, but she wrote that someone sent her our poem, the one I read at our very first gathering, and she had read it every morning since. She said her daughter had just left home, said she was relearning how to fill the quiet, said she'd started a garden with her bare hands and a stubborn heart. At the bottom of the letter, she wrote, "I thought I was too old to start again. Turns out, I was just waiting for permission." I read it aloud to Ruthie and Arthur. Ruthie sniffled. Arthur wiped his glasses and pretended it was dust. Emily made bookmarks with that line and tucked them inside every donated book we gave away after that. Sometime in October, I got a call from Kendrick. He sounded relaxed, which always meant he had news. "A small publishing house wants to compile stories from the porch light," he said. "Something about healing through community." I laughed. "They want a book?" "They want your words, Lorraine. Turns out the world's listening." I didn't answer right away, because a part of me, the quiet, bruised part that still remembered the train station and the forged signature, wanted to say no, wanted to stay small, unseen. But another part, the part that had folded towels and poured tea and stood quietly at the edge of every woman's story for the last year, that part knew better. So I said, "Okay, let's tell them everything." The first story I wrote was about Marta, not because hers was the most dramatic or the loudest, but because it reminded me that survival doesn't always look like what people expect. It doesn't come with a speech or a banner. Sometimes, it looks like showing up in sunglasses and staying for tea. Sometimes, it looks like slipping a note into a mailbox and hoping someone reads it gently. That winter, I decorated the porch light with string lights and paper snowflakes cut by hand, each one unique. Ruthie said I was overdoing it, but she helped anyway. Arthur brought in a space heater shaped like a fake fireplace. It made a low humming noise and glowed orange like a lantern. The days were short, but the rooms felt long. Every week, someone new came in, and every time, they asked the same quiet question with their eyes. "Will I be seen here?" And every time, we answered yes, even when the answer came as a warm drink, a quiet seat, or a shelf full of books waiting for hands that trembled. On the last day of the year, I sat alone at the front desk. Everyone else had gone home. It was quiet. I looked around the room, at the worn rug, the faded couch cushion, the bookshelf someone built from salvaged wood. None of it matched, and all of it mattered. I thought about Jackson. I thought about the moment he slid that envelope under my door, how it once felt like the closing of something sacred. But now, with time and peace layered over the wound, I understood. It wasn't the end. It was a mirror, a reflection of who he chose to be and who I chose not to become. I didn't hate him anymore. I just didn't hold space for him. That's a kind of love, too. One that says, I see what you did, and I see what I did with it, and I chose better. The streetlights flickered on outside. Snow began to fall again, light and slow. I stood and turned off the overheads. Just the porch light remained. I walked to the door, opened it for a moment, and let the cold settle around my ankles. Then I stepped back inside, shut the door behind me, and smiled. Because everything I had once lost, I had found again. Not in the same shape, not in the same people, but in something softer, something that stayed. So now, here we are, at the end of the road, or maybe just a bend in it. The porch light is still on, always on, not because someone's arriving, but because someone, somewhere, still needs to see it, still needs to believe that safety exists in a place they haven't reached yet. If you've been listening tonight, maybe you recognize something small in this story. Maybe a moment reminded you of your own silence, or your own standing up. Maybe you remembered the time someone left you behind, and you decided not to disappear. Let me say this as gently and clearly as I can. You do not have to earn peace. You do not have to explain your hurt for it to be valid. And you certainly do not have to stay small just because someone else couldn't see your worth. There is a version of you that rises, not because you're fearless, but because you're done being overlooked. That version might be quieter, but she's stronger, and she remembers. She remembers everything. So take your time, rest when you need, and when you're ready, open the windows. Sweep the steps. Start something small that grows because you gave it a name. Even if it's just a place where someone can sit and be, even if it's just you, holding a cup of tea in a room no longer crowded by ghosts. Sleep soft tonight. You are not alone. The light is still on. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.